Hey guys, it's me Sujo over here. So finally, I decided to come back to YouTube. I had a lot of problems with my phone. It was hacked by the Chinese. So yeah, I'm right now in Vietnam. I want to talk about this topic. Like um, Indian tourists are not treated properly in Vietnam. This is my personal experience. Like what I've been seeing. So if you're an Indian tourist planning to come out here for a holiday to Vietnam, I think you should watch this video. So I myself am an Indian. I've been living out here in Vietnam for over 8 years now, and what I have been actually seeing and experiencing um, is nothing less than discrimination and poor treatment by most of the Vietnamese. Um, I've seen Indian tourists, when they go to these tourist locations out here in Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon, even in Hanoi when I was there, they get shouted at, they're treated poorly, um, and there's also a lot of racism out here when it comes to um, Vietnamese people. When they actually see Indians, they stare at them, with hate. I'm not shitting on Vietnam, but I'm just letting you know that. Sorry, I'm making a vertical video because I'm right now here at the Taka Plaza, the food court. So I'm just eating my food right now. Um, yeah, it's you got to make that decision, before you come to Vietnam for a holiday. I mean, apart from the scams, ripping off foreigners, um, Indians usually in Vietnam are treated poorly, like second-class citizens. Um, there's no respect, and especially if you're walking around the tourist locations here in Saigon, or even if you go to Hanoi, or you're not treated properly. And like most of the time when I walk around the streets, like today I was walking around the streets of Saigon, I mean, I felt so fucking uncomfortable, like some Vietnamese people staring at me like I'm some kind of a wild animal, knowing the fact that I've got dark brown skin, which I'm very proud of, and I look different. Again, I just want to let you know I'm not shitting on Vietnam, but if you're planning to come to Vietnam as an Indian tourist or as an Indian expat, or you gotta take this into consideration that I see a huge dislike of Indians from the Vietnamese, which is really sad. Um, Even at the airport immigration checkpoints, Indian passport holders are discriminated. They are made to wait longer at the immigration checkpoint, because the Vietnamese immigration officers, they will kind of discriminate the Indian passport, knowing that the Indian passport is much stronger than the Vietnamese passport, and knowing that the Indian economy is far more bigger than the Vietnamese economy. But I do see a lot of racism, a lot of hatred, a lot of dislike towards Indians. They're not friendly. Compared to Thailand, where I had a very positive experience, where you can check out my Thailand videos. I never had that kind of a situation. Okay, maybe 1%, 2% of the time I would have some bad exposure as an Indian tourist, but I think overall Thai people are extremely very warm and friendly, which I don't find out here in Vietnam, especially if you're here in Saigon, Ho Chi Minh, and even in Hanoi. There is a lot of rudeness. The level of rudeness towards Indians by the Vietnamese is really to the next level. Like I've even seen Indian tourists, being shouted at the Saigon airport, Saigon International Airport. They're being harassed, discriminated. Even when they are checking in their baggages and everything. It's just that I don't think India is looked very favorably by the Vietnamese, and I think it's a shame because most of the Vietnamese media, they talk a lot of negative content towards Indians, towards India, and of course, if you check the YouTube channel, if you type India in Vietnamese, which is Ando, a lot of negative content is there, so, I think Vietnamese people, Vietnam in general, is not very much India friendly. Again, I would like to say that I'm not shitting on Vietnam, but the level of rudeness and unfriendliness towards Indians in Vietnam is high. Indians are not treated very favorably out here in Vietnam. There is a high degree of racism and discrimination towards Indians here in Vietnam. Of course, lack of opportunities for sure towards Indians. Um, but it's like I said, there's a lot of white privilege out here. I mean, in general, in Southeast Asia, but it's predominantly very high out here in Vietnam. Like if you're a white tourist, um, or even if you're a Chinese or Korean, you would be treated very well. But um, I don't think they're very India friendly. It's just like I've been living here for so many years. I've seen Indian tourists being shouted at, treated poorly. I don't think Vietnamese are a bunch of friendly people towards Indians. Like of course, if you go to some tourist locations, there are places where they would be nice to you, but at the end of the day, it's just because they need the money from you, right? Which is okay. But overall, if I look at the general environment, I don't think it's very India friendly. Somebody's got to talk about it. Like my channel, Sujoy in Vietnam, is straight up no BS. I expose racism in Southeast Asia. Um, and I think the best interest would be to skip your Vietnam trip for 2025 and 2026, because let there be a drop of tourism out here in Vietnam, because Vietnam needs to realize that if you treat Indian tourists poorly, Indian expats poorly out here in Vietnam, treat them like second-class citizens, judging them by the color of their skin and how they look. Uh, it's not going to work out. It's not going to work out. Yes, you can come for a business trip and everything, but I don't think it's worth the money if you're coming here for a holiday to Vietnam, unless and until you want to get treated like a second-class citizen and get exposed to discrimination and whatever. And I'm not fabricating the story. I have experienced this straight up Indian tourists being shouted at, and I've even made a YouTube short video where some Indian female tourists, they were being shouted at by some Vietnamese vendors at Ben Thanh Market, which is a very famous market out here in Ho Chi Minh City. And sorry, I'm making a vertical video because I would be making a lot of content from my home. But right now, I'm just making a vertical format video. And I don't think it's changing. So I think the best option would be, if I were an Indian tourist, I would skip Vietnam for 2025 and 2026 till the time the Vietnamese overall population, majority of the population, they realize the importance of Indian tourists, the Indian expats here in Vietnam. Again, I'm not shitting on Vietnam. I know that India and Vietnam have very strong relationship, but a bilateral relationship. But when I'm talking about people-to-people interaction, like an Indian tourist, you know. So like I said, a lot of Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, and of course white tourists, they're pretty much preferred out here in Vietnam. But of course, Indians are discriminated out here, and I'm not making up the story. Even if you go to Vietnam, if you land at Vietnam, you go to the airports, you would be discriminated with your passport. You will have to stand. Your your immigration checkpoint passport check would be longer compared to any other passports which most of these Vietnamese immigration officers check. And sometimes they're being harassed. Indian tourists are being harassed when entering Vietnam. So I think the Vietnam Tourism Authority needs to seriously look into this, change the mindset of most of the Vietnamese. And of course, the media needs to address this. The importance of Indian tourists, the importance of Indians here in Vietnam. You cannot just discriminate us. You cannot just, practice racism. And I mean, I digress, but if I look at the racism level in Southeast Asia, I would say that Vietnam is the second most racist country in Southeast Asia, according to me, for sure. Um, I'm talking like a person of color as an Indian. Yes, you would see also other contents by Indians, tourists, who are coming to Vietnam, and but they're just promoting their channel because they have a travel channel, or most of them are travel vloggers. I'm not a travel vlogger. I expose racism in Southeast Asia, and I would say the level of racism in Vietnam is pretty high, and especially the younger generation, the younger Gen Z out here in Vietnam. You know, um, I do see a lot of hatred, negativeness towards Indians, which is quite shocking. And of course, like I said, the staring problem. They'll stare me down like a wild animal. So based on all this, I would love to hear from you. Like, have you experienced negative vibes out here in Vietnam? Have you experienced second-class treatment out here in Vietnam? I would love to hear from you. You can write it down in the comment section below. So yeah, I'm back in the YouTube game. I'm not, I had some issue with my OnePlus phone. It was hacked by the Chinese. The software and everything. I was being, so yeah, that's how it goes. Cause like I said, my channel is straight up, no BS. I like to speak my mind. Uh, yeah, and if you found this video to be informational, make sure to like the video and all the good stuff. Additionally, you can support my content. You can buy me a coffee, or you can you can support me on PayPal. Like I said, I'm trying to provide you. I'm boots on the ground. I'm trying to provide you the reality. I'm not fabricating any story. I'm not shitting on Vietnam, but this is the reality, right? So if I were you, I would skip Vietnam for 2025 and 2026 as an Indian tourist. This is me, Sujoy. Peace out.